behalf of the congregation here, we want to say how thankful we are to see everyone. I'm so grateful for the, the visitors that have come and traveled some distance to be with us. I know that the majority of you, if not all of you, you put in a full day's work, and it would have probably been real relaxing just to go home and enjoy the fruit of your labors today, but instead you pack up the car and you drive an hour or however far it was to be here. And the congregation here really appreciates your interest and your support. So thankful for the attendance of the membership of this congregation. You know, a lot of times in the meetings we're always commending the visitors for being there, but we're also thankful for the faithful commitment of the members of this congregation to show your commitment and your sincerity in the work here, and to be here to be a part of this and to make this meeting and this occasion something that's special and glorifying to God. I appreciate the feedback from last night's sermon, and I just want you to know, as my wife told me not long after we got into doing this, and she said, if anybody comes to you and tells you thank you, you tell them to thank the Lord. So my wife told me to do that, and I always do what she says. So you thank the Lord, because it's His word, and I just try not to get in the way, and just humble myself, and to, as anybody that gets up here, to be able to present the truth in a way that just to let the power of the word work. And it doesn't need a whole lot of fluff from any of us. We just want to make it clear, and so that God can work in your heart and work in our lives by the power that He's given to us through the Word. This evening, for a little while, we want to talk about attitudes and habits that threaten the church's health. And I know that's a pretty catchy title, isn't it? You know, some titles you just say, this is what we're going to talk about. You know, you don't have to get cute or have any kind of mysteries. This is what we're going to talk about. And tonight we're going to talk about attitudes and habits that threaten a church's health. I'm speaking tonight as an elder. I'm an elder at our congregation back in Fort Smith. And also, as a disclaimer, the elders didn't ask me to talk on this. This is a lesson that I give as an elder back at our congregation, but it's a lesson that I think that we need to teach everywhere. Because there are certain attitudes and habits that we can have as members, individual members of a congregation, that can impact the health of a congregation, maybe in ways that we don't fully realize and understand. You know, we think, well, I'm one person. So if I've got a bad attitude or a bad habit, what's the deal? You know, I'm just one among many. Well, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so tonight we're going to talk about just some attitudes and habits. This is what I call a shotgun lesson. We're just going to throw a bunch of stuff out and see where it lands. And to sound a warning. You know, whenever Jesus was upon the earth in His earthly ministry, He sounded warnings. And the reason that He gave warnings was, if you're not aware of the danger, you're going to be susceptible to it. Take heed and beware of the leaven of the scribes and the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. If you're not aware of the danger of becoming a hypocrite, it's real easy, because of our carnal nature and in the expression and the practice of our religion, to just slide into that role as a hypocrite, to where we're just playing a part. He said to take heed and beware of covetousness, because a man's life doesn't consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. Look at the abundance that we live in this country. If we're not careful, it's going to be real easy for us to make our life about our toys and our things. And so we have to be warned constantly. And there are just attitudes and habits that if we don't constantly warn and keep them in the forefront of our minds, that we can become susceptible to them. And then those habits and those attitudes can begin to crystallize in a congregation and take a congregation that's healthy, a congregation that's thriving, and bring about dysfunction in it. And so whenever we look at the habits and attitudes that we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to look at 6. And these are just 6 that in our team teacher meetings that we have back in Fort Smith, we come together and we talk about what we're going to talk about. And I said, this is what I'm going to talk about. And I came with 3 in particular that I wanted to address. And as we sat there for a while, the list grew to 12. And then we pared it down to 6. So you're going to get the 6. And these aren't 6 that are present in Fort Smith. These are 6 that we want to make sure don't occur in Fort Smith. These are 6 that we want to make sure does not occur in South Penn. These are 6 that we want to make sure don't occur in any congregation, because they're attitudes and habits that can be so subtle that over the course of time they can spread like a leaven among congregations. And these aren't just the big sins, like somebody getting up and teaching heresy. Okay, if you're an elder and somebody gets up and teaches heresy, you can spot that and you can get on that. Or if somebody is just in some big abject sin, that's just noticeable to everybody. These are things that creep in. These are things that kind of develop like a cancer and can grow tentacles among a congregation. And then it's already settled in maybe before you realize it, or maybe before the leadership can realize it. And it's those silent habits and attitudes that we need to be aware of. And as an overseer, what I would implore you to do is to oversee yourself. To oversee yourself and to guard yourself against the attitudes and the habits that we're going to talk about this evening. The first thing I want to notice in Ephesians 4 and verse 16, where Paul says, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by the which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. So as members of our congregations, if you're a visitor, a member of your congregation, or a member of the congregation here, you might wonder, okay, what's my share? What can I do? When there's different services and there's different abilities and there's different talents that vary among us. But there's one thing that we can all do. Make sure you don't mess things up. Just make sure you don't mess things up. That can go a long way to contributing to the health of a congregation. And that's something we can all do. We can all check our attitudes. We can all check our habits. You don't have to have special training for that. All you need to have is just an honest heart and a desire to be a contributing member to the congregation that you're a part of. And so what we're going to do tonight, it's kind of setting the bar low, but it's a necessary bar. Don't mess things up. Constantly watch over yourself and be observant of yourself and be guarding against these attitudes and these habits. The first thing that we're going to look at is apathy. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, well, I don't care. Well, okay, I can't talk to you about it because you don't care, but apathy. What is apathy? Apathy is just a lack of interest or concern, or just indifference. Just an indifference. And you might think, well, I'm not indifferent towards the church. I understand the importance of the church. And, I don't think that there's anyone here tonight that's indifferent towards the church, because you probably wouldn't be here if you were indifferent towards the church. But we're not talking about just a general indifference towards the church. We're talking about an indifference towards the work and the function of the church. The work and the function of the church. To where you don't really have an interest or a concern. Somebody else is going to take care of it. I'm just one among many, so, there's other people that have more ability, they're more talented than me, they can take care of it. You need to be careful that attitude does not creep into your mind and cause you to think that I'm not really important and what I can do for the church is not really important. Whenever we look at apathy, obviously we always start out in Revelation 3 talking about the church at Laodicea. That they were neither cold nor hot, but because you are lukewarm, Jesus says, because you say I am rich and become wealthy and have need of nothing. That's what an attitude of apathy does. It doesn't see a need in anything. It doesn't see need. There is no concern. And as a member of a congregation, our antennas should all be up to the needs of the congregation to have willing hands and willing hearts and willing feet to move to those needs. But if we become a congregation that we just kind of sit back and we have an apathetic attitude towards it, that somebody else is going to take care of it, this is going to sound funny, that's one of the drawbacks of having talented people in your congregation. That some people are just so talented that everybody else just kind of sits back and thinks, well, they're going to take care of it. You can't have that attitude. Regardless of the talent that you perceive in your congregation or in my congregation, your part, your share is necessary. It's necessary. And you should always be looking for the needs and have a willingness to serve and to minister to those needs. In Proverbs 18 and in verse number 9, Solomon says, "He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer." The word slothful that you see there, some translations will say, a lazy person, but it also carries within it, I've got an alarm going off, I'm sorry. It also carries with it the idea of just negligence. That a person who is negligent in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer. Now think about that for just a moment. Whenever you think of a great destroyer, think of all of these DIY shows that you see on TV where they're going in to do a renovation and the guy gets the sledgehammer and he's got the goggles on and the gloves on and he's feeling really macho and he just takes that and just starts banging and bashing things. I mean, that's obvious destruction. That's a great destroyer. A man that is negligent in his work is a brother to that person. Well, now, how is someone who is negligent in their work a brother to a great destroyer? It's because a person who is negligent in their work, they are a destroyer. It's just not as evident. Their destroying is more like a rot or a decay. And I want you to think about apathy in those terms, that apathy brings rot into the congregation. You don't want to be a member of this congregation and bring rot among the people here. But rather, you want to be someone who is diligent in carrying out the service and the work. In Proverbs 10, verse number 4, "He who has a slack hand becomes poor." And again, the word slack there carries with it the idea of being a negligent person, that person becomes poor. That the work of this congregation is at a level that needs to be maintained for the growth and the function to continue to carry on. Back in Fort Smith over the last 2 years, we've experienced the Lord has blessed us with increase and has blessed us with growth. And sometimes you just kind of want to sit back and just enjoy it. But you know what? You can't sit back and enjoy it. Because the diligence that it took to produce that work and to produce that increase through the blessing of the Lord is also the diligence that's necessary to maintain that and to build upon it. And as soon as you begin to sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor and you become apathetic, what's going to take place? It's going to begin to rot. And so what I've had to accept at Fort Smith is this is just the new normal. This is just the new normal. Where it used to be, you had to, look and try to find people to study with. Now we've got new members coming up to us. When can we get together and study? I mean, there's guys that want to study 2 and 3 times a week. And all of the training that's involved, training them to teach, training them to lead songs, all of that activity has become necessary. And then if we sit back and you have an apathetic attitude, then that momentum and that increase begins to slowly rot. And I always have to check myself. See, I like to work in bursts. Burst, okay, kind of sit back, all right, and enjoy, and then step back up and burst again. But you can't do that now. You got to be bursting all the time. Phones ringing, emails coming in, text messages, and it's a great thing. And so here at this congregation and where you are, understand that you cannot bring an apathetic attitude to that congregation, because if you do, you're going to become someone that's bringing rot in amongst the church. The next one is complaining. Oh dear. The expression of dissatisfaction or annoyance about something. I hope I don't come up here as a complainer about complainers. Complaining in a congregation. If you're a complainer, if I'm a complainer, we're doing nothing good for the congregation. In Philippians 2, verses 14 and 15, Paul said, "Do all things without complaining and disputing." And notice the next statement, that you may become blameless and harmless. If we are a complainer, we're neither blameless or harmless. We're neither blameless or harmless if we are complainers. If we're constantly expressing dissatisfaction or annoyance, and you know those people, maybe you're one of those people, maybe I'm one of those people, to where we are always expressing dissatisfaction over something. Have you ever sat and had a conversation with a complainer? And you just sit and you listen, and then you get up and you feel like you've got to go home and take a shower. Because you just feel it's just so tainted. Whenever we complain because of unmet expectations. Well, brother so-and-so didn't do this the way I thought he ought to do it. Why aren't the lights brighter? Why is it so cold in here? It's just always something that is an expression of dissatisfaction and annoyance. When you look at those things and you may, well, those aren't big things. Yeah, they are. The cumulative effect of all of those little complaints creates within a congregation an attitude of discontent. In talking about complaining, a lot of studying being done about complaining. One unfortunate downside to both venting and to chronic complaining is that it can dampen people's moods. Whenever you're complaining to someone, you're making them worse. You're making them worse. Every time. Every time. So just know it, okay? So if you're getting ready to complain about something, you need to know, whoever's listening to me, I'm going to make them worse. Goes on to say, in one series of studies, researchers tracked people's moods before and after hearing a complaint. As predicted, listening to gripes made people feel worse. But notice the next statement. What's more, the complainer also felt worse. Sometimes we get this idea, well, it's good to vent. It'll make you feel better. No, it won't. No, it won't. All your venting and all your complaining is doing is just crystallizing that dissatisfaction in your heart and making you carry it with you everywhere you go. You're not getting better. We may think that when all of this stuff is spewing out of our mouth, we're getting it out of our heart, but really you're not. All you're doing is exercising the discontent in your heart, and when you exercise something, what do? You make it stronger. You make it stronger. And so if you or if I have a penchant towards complaining, we need to understand the damage that it causes, not only to ourselves, but to everyone else. Well, how can I know if I'm complaining? Well, does that mean I just don't say anything to anybody if something's not right? No. How can I know if I'm complaining? Number one, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Is the person that you're talking to going to be able to affect the change that you're complaining about? So the light bulbs in here aren't bright enough. We need to change out the light bulbs. Well, if you complain to my wife about the light bulbs, she's not going to do much about that. But if you go to the people that can do something about the light bulbs, then you have some credibility to what it is that you're offering up. But most of the time, we don't go to the people that can really affect the change. We just go to the people that will listen to us express our discontent. So who are you talking to? Why are you talking to them? Are you talking in order to affect change, or are you talking just to express your discontent and feel like you are exercising a certain amount of power and control in a situation? You're not. What you're doing and what I'm doing, if we complain, is we're making everything worse. Some people wonder, well, I can't, nobody ever comes over to visit me. Well, have you ever heard yourself talk? Our places, when people come into our homes, whenever they leave, our goal should be, I want that person to be a better person for coming into my home. And if they come into my home and all I do is complain, what's going to happen? They're not going to leave a better person. Are there things there's unmet expectations everywhere in the world. There are reasons to complain about everything. But understand the damage that complaining can cause to a congregation, and guard your heart against that. A cousin to that is a critical spirit. A critical spirit is a negative attitude of the heart that seeks to condemn, tear down, and destroy with words. In James chapter 4, verse 11, James says specifically, "Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge." Do not speak evil. To have a critical spirit means that I become critical of you and you become critical of me. To where we point out each other's faults, each other's weaknesses, the things about each other that we don't like. And why do we do that? One of the reasons that we have a critical spirit is because we are insecure people. And whenever we're insecure people, the way we try to validate ourselves is by making everybody else appear worse than really what we are. And in congregations where there are insecure people, and in congregations where a critical spirit abounds, you see hindrances to relationships that are going to thwart the work of that congregation. In James's context that he's talking about here, if you go back to James chapter 3, James talks about how that among those people there was envying among themselves. There was jealousy among themselves. And so then whenever he says, "Brethren, he who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge." See, the Bible calls us to be doers of the word, not judges of the word. And because of their envy and jealousy, then they had a critical spirit towards each other. They were speaking evil towards each other, and they were busy judging instead of busy doing. And the Bible is very clear. Where is the blessing in the Lord's work? In the doing. But if we become a critical person to where we're always looking at others and judging others, and we're applying the law as a judge instead of being a doer of the law, we won't be blessed and our congregations won't be blessed. In Ephesians 4:31, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice." To put it away. A congregation cannot function in a way that honors God if its members are critical of one another. Look around this building. If there's someone here tonight that you're critical of, you need to check your heart. If there's somebody here that I'm critical of, somebody back home that I'm critical, I need to check my heart. I'm not doing anything to advance the health and the growth of my congregation. Entitlement. Entitlement is the belief that one is exempt from or has diminished responsibility and or deserves special treatment. Laurie and I have a saying, "You're not special." There are no special people. Well, we're special in the sense that we're God's people, but not special in the sense that some of us have certain responsibilities or they're diminished responsibilities and deserve special treatment. But sometimes in a congregation, people can form that attitude, "I'm just a little bit special." And whenever you think of entitlement, you don't see the word entitlement in the Scriptures, but you do see this in Romans 12, verses 3 and 5, "For I say through the grace given to me, for everyone who is among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function. So we, being many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another." Get it back up here. Not to think more highly of ourselves. Entitlement can be brought about by different things. I can just think I'm just more talented and I'm more special. And so because I am more talented and I am more special, people need to cater me in a certain way, in a special way. Whenever it comes to decisions, I should be given certain consideration in those decisions. My voice should matter just a little bit more than everybody else's voice. And whenever we have that entitled opinion of ourselves, then what we're doing is we're creating an inequity in the body and then bringing about harm to the function and the work of the body. The Apostle Paul said in Philippians 2, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. And that's what entitlement is conceit. I just think that I'm special. And so if I want something a certain way, it has to be done that way. There's another type of entitlement that I want to talk about for just a moment, and that is victimhood entitlement. That's an entitlement that you see prevalent in our culture today, where the more victim status that people can stack upon themselves, they feel like they're more entitled to special treatment and special consideration and diminished responsibility because of their victimhood. And I want to speak very compassionate whenever we talk about this. There are people who go through experiences in life and they suffer traumas and they have certain situations about them that do put them in a disadvantaged situation a lot of times. And so we want to recognize that. But whatever situation you're in, as bad as it is, we have to be disciplined not to diminish the responsibilities that we have and expect special treatment from other people. And whenever we have a special situation that maybe we've been victimized with, we can look at it as one of two ways. I can look at my responsibility through the lens of my victimhood. And I can shape my responsibility and my treatment through the lens of my victimhood. Or I can look at my victimhood through the lens of my responsibility. And that makes a big difference. In one instance, I'm either diminishing my responsibilities and expecting special treatment because of the victimhood that I have experienced, or by understanding my responsibility, I can look at how I can overcome that victimhood that I have experienced. And so instead of walking around seeking to disqualify ourselves, maybe because of some victim status that we've suffered, and again, I speak that with compassion and with care because those situations are real, we should look at our responsibilities and see how we can overcome the situation that we've experienced. Now, I've had people ask me, well, how do you think God's going to judge me because I'm this, this, and this? Well, why don't we just focus on what the Lord has called you to do and you just do that and not wonder if the Lord's going to give you special favors or special breaks. And understand your responsibility. Because having an entitled attitude and having this idea that I have a diminished responsibility and I deserve special treatment is not healthy for the congregation. And again, we want to be compassionate to people's situations. And I don't want to diminish the things that people go through that put them in a disadvantaged situation. But I do want to implore you, as much as is within you, don't allow that situation to diminish your sense of responsibility and service to the Lord. Partiality. Bias in favor of one person compared with another. Favoritism. Whenever we look at the scripture, James says in James 2:1, my brethren, do not hold the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with partiality. Can't get any more straightforward than that. It's important for us to understand the unity of the body and how that Satan is going to seek to exploit any schism that he can. Any schism that he can. And in a congregation of people, it's real easy to show partiality and to create cliques that Satan can use to expose weakness in a congregation. There's all different types of cliques that we can have in a congregation. There are family cliques, okay? There's this family clique over here and this family clique over here. There are cliques according to vocation, okay? We've got all the white-collar workers over here together and all of the blue-collar workers over here. There are those that are hobbies, okay? So we've got all the fishermen over here and we've got all the golfers over here. There's all different ways that we can form cliques in a congregation. And what will happen is that whenever Satan sees the blue-collar clique or the white-collar clique and then the blue-collar clique, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to create situations and create tensions where the blue-collar clique is looking at the white. They just think they're so good. And then the white-collar looks down, they're not as important as we are. And then you begin to create that critical spirit. And it's important that we always make it purposeful to where we reach out and we interact with everyone. Go out of your way to have fellowship and to have a meaningful purpose and interaction with those that are different than you are. To avoid the cliques that can be exploited by Satan. In Romans 12 and 16, be of the same mind one towards another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Associate with the humble. So wherever you are in the congregation, wherever you are socioeconomically, wherever you are, one of the more dangerous cliques that we can have in a congregation are those cliques that are formed around Christian liberties in certain doctrinal positions. We have to be very careful that Satan does not exploit those, that we show the same love for those that maybe hold a different conscience towards a liberty than I have. Inconsiderate. Showing a lack of manners or consideration for others. You've been around inconsiderate people before. They just don't think of anybody else but themselves. And it's important that we always have a consideration for each other. In Romans chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, for then, we then who are strong ought to bear the scruples of the weak. So here, Paul is addressing a couple of cliques. You had the weak clique and you had the strong clique. And so what's he saying to them? That instead of exercising your liberty in order to satisfy yourself, you need to do what you do not to please yourself, but let each of us please his neighbor for his good, leading to edification. Whenever you have a decision to make, and maybe it's a decision that's going to, a decision that's going to be out there in front of everybody, what do you think about whenever you're thinking about that decision? Do you think about, well, this is what I want to do. I've got a right to do this, so I'm just going to do it. Or do you consider its impact on your brothers and sisters? I hear a lot of people sometimes say, well, you know what, I just don't care what people think. I just do what I want to do. As if they're expressing, just great strength of character. You know what they're expressing? Ignorance. Ignorance. If we pride ourselves on just doing what we want to do without any consideration of anybody else, we're expressing ignorance. Because you can't have meaningful relationships without having a deep consideration for the people that you're with. I know in my position, and I'm sure the elders here and other elders in the congregation, there are things that, I feel like I've got a liberty to do. Maybe would like to do them, but I'm not going to do them. Because I've got to consider the flock. And you might think, well, yeah, you're an elder. But you know what? All of the sheep have to consider the flock also. And you need to be considerate of one another and to think about one another and the impact of your actions. 1 Corinthians 10:24, let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. In other words, in anything that I do, I want to make sure that it promotes not my interest, but the interest in the well-being of other people. Oh, well, you're just saying you just be a people pleaser. Well, the Bible does say not to please ourselves, but to please his neighbor for his good. that my consideration of your interest is to exceed my own, and that I have to give consideration to you in all of the thoughts and in all of the actions that I carry out. Hebrews 10:24, what is it the Hebrew writer says? Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. Consider one another. And again, this is on the heels of the admonition, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together. And maybe sometimes whenever the church is getting together, you don't feel like you don't feel like being there, but do you think about those people that need you there? That maybe on that Wednesday evening, boy, I'd like to stay in this recliner, but brother so-and-so and sister so-and-so, they need me there. And that's not having an inflated opinion of yourself. That's just recognizing what the Bible says about you and about me. We need each other. We need each other. We are members one of another. So there's our list. Apathy, complaining, critical spirit, entitlement, partiality, and inconsiderate. Well, this has been a really jolting lesson, hasn't it? So let's end it on a good note, okay? So what's the opposite of apathy? Diligence. So let's beware of apathy and let's aspire to diligence. Never take for granted the work of this congregation or the congregation where you are. Never take for granted your part and your participation in the work that is vital to the health and the growth of your congregation. Instead of being complaining, be thankful. Is everything going to be good? No. There's not a place in this world that you're going to go where everything is going to be the way that you want it. But there's also not a place in this world that you go that you can't find something to be thankful for. And especially among God's people. Maybe the lights aren't as bright as I want them, but old brother so-and-so there, he loves me to death. And I'm going to focus on that because that's really what matters. Lights aren't a big deal. We could put up candles if we needed to. But old brother so-and-so, he means the world to me and he loves me. You're always going to have things to be thankful for. Instead of a critical spirit, have a constructive spirit. Instead of speaking about your brother or sister to tear them down, make it your purpose to speak things that will build them up. Is brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so perfect? No. Are there things you can find that you could pick at about them? Absolutely. We can do that to everybody, can't we? We could just have us a hen-picking party if we wanted to. Until we just pick one another to death. How about building up? Speaking constructively to each other. Yeah, the shortcomings are there. But that's something that we've got to understand, is that those bad things are always going to be there. And if we just wait for all of the bad things to clear up and go away before we start doing the good things, it ain't ever going to happen, is it? We just got to start doing the good things in the midst of all of the things around us that we don't like. Entitlement. Be a responsible member. Be a responsible member. Don't expect special treatment. Don't expect diminished responsibility. And wherever you are and whatever your situation is, always aspire to be that responsible member regardless of the challenges that you are facing. And instead of being partial, show impartiality. Go out of your way to speak to that brother or sister that's not like you. If you're a white-collar worker, go have lunch with that blue-collar worker. I hesitate to say this. If you're an OU Sooner fan, you go have lunch with that OSU Cowboy. That got a nerve, didn't it? I debated whether I should even do that or not, but why not? Have consideration for each other. Care for one another. Do what you do in the interest of others, to put their interest before yours. Sacrifice things that you want to do in order for the betterment of other people. And do things that you don't want to do for the betterment of other people. Those are the attitudes, those are the habits that are going to make a congregation healthy, that are going to make a congregation thrive and a congregation grow. Can you do that? Can I do that? Check your heart. make sure that there is no leaven in your heart that's going to be a place where rot is going to begin to spread. But always do everything you can to contribute to the health of the congregation. I appreciate your attention, and I hope that what we've studied tonight, again, we've just kind of been all over the place. But sometimes that's how you have to teach. You just go all over the place. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, we haven't discussed the terms of the gospel, but as always, the gospel goes out from this congregation all the time. The message of Jesus Christ and his death upon the cross, being that perfect, sinless Lamb of God, dying and suffering on the cross as a sinner, so that you as a sinner can be saved and have fellowship and to be brought in communion with the eternal God of grace of heaven. And you want to respond to that gospel by being baptized in Jesus, where Jesus' death becomes your death, and where you're raised together with Jesus Christ and you're made alive together with him to walk in that newness of life. If you're here tonight and you are a Christian, and some of the things that we've talked about, maybe you look at those and you think, ooh, I see one or two of those up there. And maybe it's a burden on your heart that you just feel like, I need to bring that burden to the congregation. I need to let them know. I need their support. I need their prayers. And I want to humble myself in that regard. Would ask you to come up, one of either class, and have a seat on the front as we stand and sing the song selected.